All right, well, this is going to be my review for The Stand by Stephen King. And specifically, what I want to talk about is specifically the complete and uncut edition. Now, this book originally was published in 1978 and it was 832 pages. The publisher um, made Stephen King cut the book because they wanted to keep it at a specific price and it was going to cost more if the book was longer. So they asked him to cut it down. He does talk about this book, the restoration. This is not just a restoration of the cut material, but it's an addition. He updates the pop culture references in the book. So I want to read a little bit at the top of this because I'm going to tell you right up front, I don't like this book. And Stephen King is going to nail it right on the head as to why. So he puts a preface in the front and he says, "This is not so much a preface, actually, as it is an explanation of why this new version of The Stand exists at all. It was a long novel to begin with, and this expanded edition will be regarded by some, perhaps many, as an act of indulgence by an author whose works have been successful enough to allow it. I hope not, but I'd have to be pretty stupid not to realize that such criticism is in the offing. After all, many critics of the novel regarded it as bloated and overlong to begin with." So there you go. And I'm going to be one of those critics that are going to go right along with that and say, yeah, this book is bloated and overlong. And before I get into tearing the book apart, telling you all the things that I don't like about it, I will say up front that the first section of the book is by far the best section of the book. It's actually divided into 3 books. So you have a book 1, which is right at the front here, okay? This section, which comprises 382 pages in the paperback. And then there's book 2, which I think is where the book really falls off a cliff. It's like, if I could compare, it's like a race car, right? Like, the book starts like a race car and then it runs out of gas, okay? And then book 3 here. So as you can see, this is by far the largest section of the book is this middle section, and I think this is the weakest section. So let me explain the setup in case you don't know what this book is about, all right? So there is a pandemic, essentially, a flu virus that's been mutated in a military lab, escapes, and wipes out 99.4% of the population of the United States. I don't know about the rest of the world. It does get outside the United States, but this book focuses on the United States. So you have 0.6% of the population survives. I think that's pretty close. Yeah, I think that's right. That's the first part, really. Okay, most of the first section. Somewhere through the middle, or I don't know, part of the first section, the book just kind of, for me anyways, it lost its focus. Like, while you have the pandemic going on, you're talking about the people getting wiped out by this thing. It moves. It's got a good pace. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of things happening. And then towards the end of that first section, we start to transition into the post-apocalypse. Like, we start to move in that direction. And then it becomes a post-apocalyptic fantasy novel. Okay, that's what it transitions into. And I think at that point is where the book, like I said, when I read the first section, I wrote a note down that said, where is the plot? Or like, what is the plot? Like, where is this going? Yeah. another one of the problems I had with this book is this feels a lot like George Lucas's special edition of Star Wars. What I mean by that is clearly King wrote this book in 1970s, like that's when it was written. Just like Star Wars was made in the 1970s by George Lucas. And then George Lucas did what he calls the special edition for the Star Wars, where he went in and he put, you know, CG characters into the Star Wars movies, and they stick out like a sore thumb. Like the Jabba the Hutt scene where Han's talking to Jabba. I mean, Jabba, it does not look like a puppet. He's completely CG, and he sticks out like crazy. And he did this with all of his movies. And you feel the same way about this Stephen King book. When you have references to Kent State, protests, the Vietnam War, Richard Nixon, and then the story's supposed to be set in the year 1990, okay, it just feels weird to have all this stuff about talking about oil crisis shortages and then have references to Nightmare on Elm Street, you know, Freddy Krueger, Madonna. There's a reference to Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger in here. There's references to Roger Rabbit from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And I know that movie came out in 1988, so yeah. And then there's even a reference to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I think in chapter 61, which I was just like, wow. And so it kind of gives you whiplash, like, because it just feels the setting of all the 1970s stuff and then the 80s references mixed in, they kind of don't mesh, so they stick out like a sore thumb. So that's a thing. And then the other thing I don't want this review to go on forever. I want to try to keep this short. So the middle portion of this, so yeah, how do I transition into this without spoiling? Okay, this is going to be maybe a slight spoiler, not a major spoiler. Let's talk about characters first. So we've got basically three main characters that are really important. There's a whole cast of characters, but the three men, Stuart Redman, I don't find him that interesting. He's kind of our point of view character that we get into, our point of entry character. He's kind of milquetoast. He's from Texas. He's a good old boy. We've got Nick Andros, who is a 22-year-old dude. He's mute and deaf, and he'll later pair up with another character named Tom, who's mentally challenged. And then the third character is Larry Underwood. And as far as I'm concerned, people go on about Stephen King's great characters, and there's only two of them in this book. You know, Stuart Redman is kind of just an archetype. He's not that deep. Same thing I can say with Nick Andros. Like, the fact that he's mute and deaf, that's the only defining characteristic that he has, you know. I would say Larry Underwood, kind of a selfish, self-centered guy who's like a rock star. He's selfish and he knows that he's selfish. He's aware of his character flaws, struggles to change. So he's something. I'm unlike other people. I don't really like Larry Underwood. He kind of reminds me of Jake Spoon from Lonesome Dove. But at least he's something. He's not just a cardboard cutout. And I would say the same thing about Harold, who is, yeah, we meet him later, but Harold ends up becoming like a fully realized character that feels real. So as far as people like, you know, saying that King writes great characters, I mean, he does, but not every character in this book is great. It's not, I would compare it to something like Lonesome Dove. Like, every character in Lonesome Dove, okay, feels like a fully realized, realistic character. And you just don't have that in this book. The female characters are absolutely useless in here. They're only here just to become love interest or get pregnant and have a baby, and that's it. They really, you know, uh, people probably get mad at me because of the Franny Goldstein character, but is it Goldstein? Whatever. I don't really care. Franny's character, she's clearly set up to be important, but she just fades into the background in the second and third book and just becomes like completely non existent. So let's talk about the main problem I have with the novel. Okay, is that once, like I said, once the pandemic section is over, the book just meanders. It loses direction. So you have these disparate character groups that are spread out across the country, but they're not in contact with each other. So there's a couple ways you can handle this. You can have it happen organically where they meet each other through like a time skip, jump ahead 5 years and say 5 years later. But King doesn't do that. That's why he has to introduce the character of Mother Abigail, who appears to people in dreams, and have them come up to Nebraska. And we also have Randall Flagg, the dark man, the wandering dude, whatever, who is the evil character who is drawing people to himself. We do have various bad guy characters in the book, like Trash Can Man and stuff, but honestly, I'm not going to really talk about them because ultimately at the end, it doesn't really matter. This book, I think the biggest disappointment for me was that it sets up for an epic confrontation that never coalesces. It's obvious that Stephen King wants this to be like Lord of the Rings. There's tons of references to Lord of the Rings in it, and Randall Flagg is clearly supposed to have like some of the powers similar to Sauron. He's got like the all-seeing eye, for instance. It pops up several times. So Randall is compared to Sauron, directly compared to him, which I don't know what that makes Mother Abigail. I guess maybe she's the Gandalf character. I don't know. She's kind of useless. Other than getting everybody together, what does she actually do? This book's a hot mess. I struggled to get through it, and the second section in the middle is just an absolute drag. Nothing happens. When they start to try to reconstruct society, and they're just having committee meetings after committee meeting after committee meeting after committee meeting, it's pretty brutal. There's a lot of just weird sexual stuff in the book for no reason. I owe Frank Herbert an apology because I think maybe in the totality of 6 Dune books, the weird sexual weirdo stuff that's in Frank Herbert, it ain't got nothing on Stephen King. Stephen King, there's probably like 6 pages, if that, in Frank Herbert in 6 books, right? This book has got so much, I couldn't even track it anymore. It's pretty absurd. There's a whole scene between the kid and Trash Can Man, which is just, I'm not even going to talk about it. I could have done without that. And I'm not some prude, okay? Like, there's sex in Lonesome Dove, but this is off-putting. It's just so grotesque. Very grotesque. And yeah, I'm going to leave that there. The one last thing I'll say about this before I end this review, because I don't want to drag it out, is that I think King is aware that the book is really going nowhere. I don't know if he had writer's block or what, but there's one key reference in the book from this diary entry of Fran. I'll read it real quick because I bookmarked it. All right, so from Fran Goldsmith's diary, this is page 551. She dates it July 19th, 1990, and she's an insufferable character. I can't stand her. She says, "Oh Lord, the worst has happened. At least in the books, when it happens, it's over. Something at least changes. But in real life, it seems to just go on and on, like a soap opera, where nothing ever comes to a head." It's a perfect description of this novel. Like, it just goes on and on. It just feels like nothing ever comes to a head. Uh, as a post-apocalyptic fantasy that's supposed to be like Lord of the Rings, it just doesn't work. If you're expecting the Battle of Helm's Deep or a battle at the Black Gate, you're not going to get that here. Randall Flagg, everybody says that they think he's a great character. I think he's kind of a letdown of a character. I don't think he's that interesting. Um, the whole third section at the end of the book is just, it's a horrible ending. It's an absolute disgrace. And the other thing I'll say is the whole idea of good versus evil. It's clear that Mother Abigail, is supposed to be some kind of like Old Testament prophet type character, like Moses. And King's calls this in his preface. He says dark Christianity. This is not Christian. People, this isn't a Christian allegory. This is a very Gnostic text. It's almost like Gnostic dualism. So I don't know what King's brand of Christianity is, but it's definitely not Orthodox. It's really weird. It's like the Gnostic Gospels type stuff. So I don't know. I don't really like it when writers do theology, because typically it ends up being really bad. I think that's why John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness, like, I love John Carpenter, but I hate that film. And I think that's why this book really fails a lot for me. Stephen King needed an editor on this. I mean, this book, you could cut 300-400 pages out of this easy and you'd be missing nothing. That middle section is a slog. So I can't recommend it. I just think it's a really overrated 1-star crap fest. Like, this book is one of the worst books I've ever read in my life. And I don't know. I'm I'm gonna put Stephen King aside for a while, because honestly, I need to take a break from him, because this wore me out. This was torture. All right, so that's it. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day.